You are listening to the Marketing 32 Show with your host, Brett Allen.
Hi, Brett Allen here, host of the Marketing 32 Show, where I connect with leading dentists, dental influencers, industry experts to uncover the latest and greatest in dentistry. What it is that you need to know and do to grow and thrive with your dental practice. This episode, of course, is brought to you by our team here at Marketing 32. We are the only dental marketing agency that I know of that is truly performance-based. So if you're not growing, you don't pay us. We really are invested in your growth. If you need help with growth, reach out to us at Marketing 32. We'll see if we're a great fit together. Quick shout out to Aaron Nicholas. Dr. Nicholas was on our show recently. He's with MondayMorningDentistry.com. You should check him out if you're interested in CE and hands-on CE. He's got a whole suite of courses, both online and in person, that you should check out. Today's guest, I'm excited to introduce you to Morgan Hamon. He's a CPA and partner at Eisner Amper, has spent over 20 years helping dental practices to take control of their finances, increase profitability, and navigate complex tax strategies. As the former president of HDA Accounting Group, he built a firm that grew to serve 900 plus dental practices across all 50 states. And now, following a merger with one of the top 20 accounting firms in the industry, he's continuing to help practice owners make smarter financial decisions. So, Morgan, welcome to the show. Happy to have you on.
Hey, real happy to be here.
Yeah, and looking forward to our conversation. We've had a CPA on here before, but I think your approach and especially the experience that you have is going to be fun to talk about in terms of profitability, helping the practice. So
I think so.
Yeah. So tell us more, Morgan. How did you get into dentistry and kind of your background?
Sure.
To now Eisner Amper today.
Yeah, well, I took the very long road to becoming a CPA. Before joining that profession, I was a Navy pilot after college. I really wanted to do that. So Navy paid for my undergrad degree, and I went right in. So I spent 11 years. I flew F-18s as a West Coast guy, and
Sweet.
Deployed. I was a flight instructor on F-18. It was a lot of great memories there. But then getting into my kind of early 30s.
Is that the photo behind you?
That's it. Yeah, that's what I flew.
Wow.
And so, a lot of operations off the aircraft carrier, which was very rewarding. But then had to eventually grow up and get a real job, right? So I went back to school, got a master's in accounting, and about that time, my dad, who's also a CPA, was we're both looking for something to do, and so we essentially did a startup that turned into HDA Accounting Group. And then just very early on, just through some luck and opportunity, found our way into the dental space, very quickly realized this was a good fit for us, and just never looked back. So it's always been a very niche firm supporting dentists who own their dental practice, so very, very specific. And we did this for many, many years up till early this year. My dad decided he finally retired, and some big shoes to fill there. And so the timing was good to combine with just a top 15 national firm to give us a deeper bench and a lot more resources to continue doing what we do. Still very specific. We're organized as a subsidiary in Eisner Amper, EAG Dental Advisors. I'm the partner in charge. We're still doing all the same things we've done for years. It's just now we have a lot more resources at our disposal to provide a more, comprehensive one-stop experience for our clients, because there's just so much more we can do. So it's super exciting. But our focus always has been and will continue to be supporting dentists who own dental practices.
Cool. And you mentioned before the show, we were chatting a little bit, you focus more on just filing returns and bookkeeping.
So what we do is we do the monthly accounting and then give our clients every month, we don't hand out just a generic P&L. We give them a full color dashboard style report called our practice profitability analysis. And then of course we do the taxes. What makes us different is most accountants out there mainly just want to do a tax return, maybe a little bit of tax planning. They're very tax oriented. I think that's backwards a little bit. If we think about why own a practice in the first place, why own a business, have to worry about marketing and growing and managing people and all that. Why do that? Well, it's not to file a tax return. It is to make a nice living and have some control over your life and build an appreciating asset. And so we want to be with our clients all year to help them achieve that. In other words, let's help you have the highest profit possible. Let's help you make money. And then we'll go to work on the taxes and help you keep as much of that as you can and get the tax returns done. So that's our mission is we really want our dentists to be successful. And then we'll do the tax work after you've been successful.
Got it. Yeah, that's great. I like a more comprehensive approach to and growth of the practice, not just file the return.
Right. And I think to do that in public accounting, you have to be a niche firm. You have to be laser focused on a specific industry. You can't do this as like a jack of all trades, CPA. I mean, you have to have a deep knowledge of your client to I think, be in that position to provide that kind of support.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I mean, us as a marketing team, there's just the nuances that you get to understand about the industry that help you have that much better of a impact with the practices you're working with. Yeah, for sure. So let's talk about that a little bit more. So I think you said upwards of 1,000 practices you're working with.
Yes.
What are you tending to see as common roadblocks or pitfalls or things that are affecting profitability? What
Yeah.
what are you seeing?
So there's if you look at the math, okay, there's two factors that affect profit. There's your expense structure, and then there's revenue, right? Those are the two factors. If we look at the equation for profit margin, it's like net income over total revenue, and of course, net income is revenue less operating expenses. So those are two variables: revenue and operating expenses. If profit is not where it should be, first of all, it's really helpful for dentists to know that. Sometimes they don't know, like, what should the profit margin be? And that's where, we can come in, because I can tell you exactly, given the composition of your practice. And specifically, we're looking at size. Is this a de novo scratch start practice? Is this an established practice? And really important to understand if there's any associates in the practice, because that can really affect where we set the goalpost for profit margin. So first thing we have to do is understand, okay, what is acceptable profit? If it is that or more, great. Let's keep it there. If it's less, then we need to diagnose. And if we go into diagnosing mode, we're looking at just the math. It is revenue or expenses. Brett, I think there's a third factor as well, and that's just the dentist's effectiveness as a business leader and just how they run that practice. Definitely has a direct correlation with profitability. But it's revenue and expenses, and I think the go-to, like, say, profit is it's just low, right? And the dentist feels that, right? Even if they don't get reports like ours that tells them every month, like they'll feel like, I'm working hard, I'm grinding away every week. Like, why is there not more money? If they feel,
I have those conversations.
Yep, they have that feeling. The go-to spot every time is like, where am I overspending? I must be overspending somewhere. And that can be the case, but I think more often than not, it's on the revenue side of the profit equation. They're either not producing like they could be. In other words, they have a practice that has a certain overhead, right? And so if you have the 6-op practice that costs $50,000 a month just to be open, I mean, you have to produce a certain amount of revenue to have that profit, right? So you're either not producing, not scheduling, not charging, or not collecting, right? So if revenue is short, that's going to pinch the profit in a hurry. So I think where you and I in marketing, where our worlds kind of collide, right? We intersect, is if we're trying to solve that revenue problem. Right? We could diagnose that very quickly. Okay, revenue's low. Why is it low? Is it a collection problem? We ask to see our clients' accounts receivable every month, even though it has nothing to do with their books or their taxes, because these are all pass-through entities. The ARs are relevant. Most accounts won't ask for the AR. I want to see it because I want to know, are you collecting money?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
If they're not collecting money, bingo. Like there we go.
That's a big one. Yeah.
But let's say the AR is super tight. They're collecting money. That's working well, but revenue's still low. All right. Are you charging what you're worth? All right. Have you not escalated fees recently? Like, okay, we're doing that too. Then it's okay. How do we fill the schedule and see patients? And that's where I think the marketing comes in, right?
Yeah.
We have to grow. We need more more fuel for the engine. We need more patients. And then, of course, I kind of getting back to that leadership and operational effectiveness. Okay, right? You got clients you're working with. You're doing your thing, getting that phone to ring. Got to make sure that phone gets answered.
Right.
You got to make sure so that it's like it can be all connected. So yeah, I mean that's where I think you and I, like what we do is definitely on that side of the profit equation.
Right.
And I think that's the more common cause of low profit than overspending, in my opinion.
Yeah. I hear a lot of practices, they turn to marketing because they think they have a marketing problem.
Okay.
And a lot of times they do, to be fair. But to your point, I think if we can improve collections, if we can improve internal team dynamics around, how's the front desk performing? That's one of the things that we look at is we built an AI call tracking dashboard for the front desk. So we can see from the calls that we're generating, how many of these are actually getting booked, and if they're getting booked, why aren't they getting booked? And so it really exposes for the front desk and helps them with our training as well. It's like, okay, if we've got these different buckets that the call gets categorized into as to why a patient's not scheduling, what needs to happen to improve that? So if it's a question about pricing, is it insurance? Is it availability? That's a big one too. We help diagnose those things too. It's not just, I think we're similar in that way. We don't just do the lead generation. We also get involved internally with like, okay, how can we improve acceptance of our booking rate? How can we do acceptance and even further, how do we get those patients to come back? Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I love that you're kind of similar in that way. It's not just about returns. I think also those CPAs that just focus on that, they're missing a huge component as to, okay, how can we advise this practice on growing the profitability? I mean, it's not just, are we putting forward the best tax strategy to minimize the tax burden, but how do we really help this practice owner with their finances? What does that mean? Right.
You have to have the horse before the cart. You got if we're going to talk tax avoidance, you got to have the profit there to be on.
Right.
That's how, let's talk about that first. And, and that's what I think we're working towards. I mean, I've owned a business for a long, long time. And, I didn't own that. I didn't set out to own that business so I could just, focus on my tax return.
Right.
I did it again. Let's make a nice living. Let's have some control of my life, and let's build something that's worth something over time, and to have a lot of professional satisfaction and pride in doing so. That's why I'm in business. The tax returns, I got to do, and of course, as a business owner, there's opportunities to save money on income tax expense that you don't have as an employee, and we certainly want to do that.
Yeah. Let's dig in a little bit more from a metric standpoint. I think since the wealth of information that you have and experience when it comes to certain numbers, where I think most of the practices we work with, they're seven-figure practices, just over that number.
Yeah.
Threshold there. Where should collections be, and where should some of these gross margin be? Let's dig into some of those.
So if we talk about that client you just described, okay, 7-figure practice. If it's a single doctor practice, successful, it will usually be somewhere 1.0 to 1.5 million collection.
Right.
You start getting past 1.5, then the doctor starts getting pretty busy. I only have so much time, and that's usually when the conversations come up. I say, hey, Morgan, I'm thinking about an associate.
Right.
What's that going to look like? So if we just focus in on kind of the 1.0 to 1.5 side practices with one doctor, owner-operated practice, the profit margin, I can tell you with absolute certainty, the profit margin needs to be 35 to 40%. Minimum.
Okay.
And if it's more than that, that's pretty common, 40 to 45, see that all the time. Right. You start getting to 50% profit margin, it starts to become a pretty exclusive club, right? it's possible, but not that common.
Mm-hmm.
So, but 35 to 40%, that's where they need to be.
That's where you need to be. If you're
If
under
it's-
that, there's something.
If you're under that, there's something we need to dig into that. We need to figure that out. You know, what's causing that. And if we go into diagnose, you know, into the movie we're going to diagnose, we'll start with the math, of course. Again, the go-to spot is, hey, where could we be overspending? Also need to look at that revenue side, and sometimes they're related. So if we're looking at our report, and so we benchmark all the main expense categories for our clients on a trailing 3-month average, and then we'll show them our client average right next to it.
Oh,
in
cool.
The same trailing 3 months, so they can see, look, we got 1,000 other private practices in the last 3 months. These are their expenses, and so we can just quickly identify, are there any outliers?
Expenses are high, yeah.
Right. And so and sometimes there's just one glaring item like staff costs, right? So we have to maybe focus in there, but you have to kind of zoom out a little bit. Like if I see every expense item's running a little bit high, I'm going right to collections, right? Because if the practice is underproducing, under collecting, that's going to make all the expenses look higher,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because you're measuring those dollar amounts against less revenue.
Right.
So you kind of have to take a holistic view at it. You can't just dial in on one thing. You have to, okay, how are these things relating? And sometimes when you dig into expenses, it can uncover a collection.
Yeah.
Figure out what it is.
What's a typical collection percentage? What does that look like?
So I don't know if we're talking about like production versus collection.
Right.
We don't always have that data. Because the law is so all our clients are pass-through entities, whether it's a sole proprietor, an S corp, or partnership, and so we have to account for that business income on an income tax basis, which is essentially a cash basis, because that profit passes through a personal tax return and pay tax person. So the business bank account has to reconcile to the business books, all right, that reconciles to the business tax return. So we see the money that's collected. So if they did a treatment that, the production was 150, but they collected 100, we see 100. So I don't always know what that does.
God.
We see the money that I like to kind of joke, look, the money we quite literally count in your bank account.
Right.
That's the money we're talking about.
Are most practices cash basis?
They have to be. We're not in the corporate. You get into the corporate, big,
the group practices,
Heartland Dental or whatever. I mean,
right.
they're going to be on, perhaps accrual, but it's cash basis for our clientele, because these are all closely held small businesses. They're pass-through entities.
Got it. Okay. Are there other areas that you guys advise in when it comes to, is it okay? So we see expenses are high. We see revenues low.
Mm-hmm.
Are there other consulting type?
Oh yeah, we get all manner of questions. Sometimes I feel like I'm a coach and therapist, not necessarily, right? Because owning a business, it's hard. I mean, it's challenging, right?
Yeah.
And these dentists, they don't get any training for it in dental school.
No. Yeah.
I'd say just make sure you have the right people on the right team. And I mean, I've had calls where we're just talking about some leadership and just being in control of your practice. I'm in a unique position to do that. Not all of the team can do that, but those are conversations with me. Common trend in the last few years is having a long-term associate buy-in, equity buy-in on the practice. Those conversations are always with me, pretty extensive, or conversations of, hey, maybe we are pushing it. We're at 1.5, 1.6. Only so many hours in the day. I still want to grow. Okay, what about an associate? What does that look like? How to structure that? We have all those kind of conversations. Of course, if someone's looking at selling their practice or buying another one and merging it together. I just had a call earlier today with a client where the lease space is up next door. Pretty nice opportunity if they're looking to expand, to knock out a wall.
Right.
You don't have to move and call up rent and say, hey, look, we got a location that's going to be like 2 miles away. We want to get all the patients over there. It's always, So there's really not any limit on what we'll talk about. We walk a fine line between what I call a profit advisor and a dental consultant, right?
Okay.
So I'll go up to that line. I'll maybe, dabble a little bit over, but if it ends up getting out of our lane, like I'll always tell them that, and then
Yeah.
hopefully kind of have a handoff to someone who can't help them. But yeah, it's sometimes we get on the phone and we never quite know where that conversation's going to go or what's on it. Everything's on the table. Like if we can help them, we will. If we can't, we say, look, I don't know why. I don't know why your revenue keeps dropping. So and if it is like a new patient flow, then I'll say, look, you got to talk to like the rep because it's getting into the marketing lane, and it's I don't know how to make that. But clearly, given your overhead structure,
Right.
if we could just get at least like $90K per month, you're going to be really happy with those results.
Good. What one question I always like to ask, I've seen some numbers from the ADA and from what I've heard from others. What's typically a marketing budget that most practices have?
I will again. I'll speak to
Yeah.
my window into the dental world, which is our long-term history with these dental practices. So I think you have to look at sort of the phase of the practice. If it's a startup, a de novo scratch start practice, they better be, and we measure this as a percentage of collections, right?
Right.
Which we'll talk about, right? So as a de novo scratch start practice, your marketing budget, it better be up in the teens, 15, 20%. You have to have a marketing plan to get that schedule full.
Right.
If we don't see it up there, it's like we're kind of scratching our head, like, well, what's your plan? You gotta get going. So then can we move past startup? Okay, now we're established practice, been around for a while. This is just like my opinion. Like say a practice, maybe they're at that 1.3, 1.4. They're just a really good spot, right? They got a nice life, they work in kind of work-life balance and that. You will have some natural patient attrition. If we're looking at just to replace that natural patient attrition so we don't shrink, because businesses it's never static. You're either shrinking or growing.
Right.
You kind of want, hopefully kind of keep it even if you're trying to stay put. You have to replace that natural patient attrition. I think a budget line item we'll see anywhere from like maybe 0.5 to 2%.
Okay.
On a fully established practice. If they're looking to, hey, look, I just want to stay put. Right, I don't want to slowly decline over time as patients,
Right. Okay.
If the practice say, look, we're wanting to grow, right, with some established practice, maybe they're not quite up to the $1 million mark. Maybe they're like 800K, and they really want to get up to like 1.5. So they're growth oriented.
Right.
Yeah, 2, 3, 4, 5%.
Right.
Totally don't blow it.
Yeah. That's what we typically say, around 5% total production.
Yeah. We get into like 5, 6, 7 for established practice. That is like foot on the gas.
Yeah,
like I want to go.
Yeah.
What's really, can be frustrating to see is when we're looking at a practice and let's say revenue is not only flat, but it's declining. We see declining revenue. Maybe sometimes it's insidious. There's always an up and down with practice, but long-term trend, revenue is coming down.
Yeah.
And then we'll see a marketing line item of like 8 or 9%. And I'll be like, hey,
marketing's not working.
Dr. Smith or whatever, like, look, we probably ought to look at this, right? Because if for an established practice, if there's 9% marketing, we should see this thing exploding.
Right.
So like, that's my question is, okay, well, what's your ROI? On the marketing, and again, I'm not a marketing guy. I don't have a metric to tell you what that should be, but just how do you feel? Like, what's your new patient flow per month?
Right.
Like, well, I'm spending 9%. I got 15 new patients last month. I'm like, I'm not a marketing guy. That sounds a little light.
Yeah.
Right? Like, how are we quantifying this return?
Right.
That's a huge investment.
Yeah, and we see that too, and it bugs me that there are marketers. There's this stigma around marketing that I'm paying this firm. I don't know what they're doing. I don't know what my ROI is. There seems to be a lot of marketers out there and it tends to be more those that aren't dental specific, where they're just telling them the data of, hey, this is your traffic, this is your rankings, this is how many clicks we got, this is how many phone calls. It's like, okay, that's those are some metrics that you should be aware of as a marketer and as a practice owner. But what does that translate into from a revenue standpoint? And so we really try to, especially since we have that performance guarantee with our team, we want to integrate and be like, okay, we spent this much on marketing. How much production came from that? So we can verify that there is growth happening and that it's in a proper metric for continuing marketing or scaling marketing. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we're almost out of time. I always like to ask the final question of like, what's that one tip or piece of advice that you could share with a practice that would really help have an epiphany or something, a ripple effect into the practice for the practice owner?
I guess the one I'll pick, and we're going to stay per our discussion here on the revenue side of that profit equation. And I think sometimes dentists, when they're in we'll call it in the grind, right? They're owning their practice, they're trying to do everything right. They want to feel, you want to feel as in control as possible, even though sometimes things are out of your control. You want to feel as in control as possible. And I think, occasionally I'll visit with the doctor and they really, to feel in control, like they really want to focus in on something. And sometimes it's like their financial statement. So I really just want to get in here. And I would say, look, review your financial reports monthly. Okay, you're going to get a report from us monthly. Ideally, you're getting something from your accountant monthly. Take once a month, go through there, analyze it. Set a call with us. We'll go through, pick out some action items, and work on those for the month. If you're wanting to do something like daily, to feel like, hey, I'm in control of my practice. I'm driving the train, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
I would say focus on your AR. If you want to pull a report every day to say, I need to look at this to make sure things are going well, look at your collections. Focus in on like that 61 to 90. If you saw that patient 2 to 3 months ago and it has now moved into 61 to 90, how come you have not been paid?
Yeah.
Right? It should be paid by now. Yeah. You're looking for anything systemic within your practice that's preventing you from getting paid. Is the claim not being filed? Is it not being filed correctly? No. Is your staff constantly underestimating the patient portion of the fee? You just kind of find that stuff. So I would say the one kind of epiphany, Brett, was that, there's no higher, more important administrative function in your practice besides collecting money. Otherwise, why bother?
Right.
Why do this, right? So make sure that collection process is working like a Swiss watch, right? And then, then follow up on all those other things too. But that's the most important.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much for that. This has been a great conversation. Thank you, Morgan, for coming on the show today. Where should we send people if they want to get in touch with you, learn more? Do you have resources you can give them?
Yeah, absolutely. If they want to check us out, our website is eagdentaladvisors.com.
EAGDentalAdvisors.com.
Yeah, so it's Eisner Advisory Group, dentaladvisors.com. EAGDentalAdvisors.com. Have samples of our reports. There's buttons all over the place to start a conversation, and that's personal. You don't go off to some obscure department. Those all come to me. So,
okay.
Yeah. And, always happy to meet new dentists and learn about their practice and see if maybe it'd be a good fit if we support.
Well, great. Yeah, I appreciate you taking the time. You guys got to go over to that website. We'll put it in the show notes. So if you're driving or whatever, you can come back to it, click on the link. But thank you again, Morgan, for coming on the show.
All right, my pleasure. And I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Until next time on the Marketing 32 Show, have a great day.